Good evening, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, MozB3K. In this video, we are going to remove and replace the power steering pump on my 1989 Ford F-350 with the 7.3-liter IDI diesel. Without further ado, let's get started. So, pump is coming out because, as far as I can tell, it's leaking like a sieve. And, if I can get it in the right spot where it'll let go, I'm going to show you what happens when you actually look at the fluid in the pump. Where's the super secret spot? There it is. Okay. So when I got this truck, it was very low on power steering fluid. Now check this out. If you stir this, see all that white, that glitter? I think this sucker is eating itself, and it does not have much for this world. Because also the steering is still power assisted, but it feels very heavy. It almost feels like you're driving a non-power steering vehicle. Not quite, but it's pretty close. So that's why it's coming out. As you can see, it's pretty greasy from here. And if you come around back and look, it's real greasy. So its adjuster for its belt tensioner is, best I can tell, it is, if you look here, let me get the camera down there. Belt. It's that guy. So pretty sure it's a 9/16. It is right next to the power steering pulley. We kind of zoom out a little bit. You can kind of see it right down there. And we need to loosen that up so that we can get the belt off. And once the belt's off, we can go after these guys. But before we go after those guys, we do have to handle the high pressure and low pressure. Oh, that would be why that's leaking. Ha ha. The high pressure and low pressure hoses. I may need a new high pressure hose. Okay, so updates there. Got the belt off. You also need to loosen this bolt. Then that actually will allow the pump to pivot finally on that other one that was loosened. It's going to be a 9/16 here as well. Now that we have the belt safely out of the way, we're going to turn our attentions to our high pressure hose, which I'm pretty sure is torched based on how it's behaving there. That might be like you want to use a flare wrench, or sometimes it's called a brake line wrench. Maybe a 9/16 there as well. Could be a little bigger. Maybe we can check it out here. Nope, that's a little bigger than a 9/16, I think. I need better light, but yeah, that's bigger than a 9/16. Okay. But before you go gung-ho to take that off, keep in mind that unless you drain the fluid out of your reservoir, the moment you crack this line, you're going to start peeing ATF. So I would suggest you have a pan in place under the vehicle to catch it when it inevitably starts going everywhere, so you don't have a murder scene. Alright, let's try this out. We got a 5/8 and a, let's see. Alright, yeah. Alright, so it's a 5/8 is what we need. And we want to turn it towards us. Oh my goodness. Hum. Oh. I don't know if that's just sliding or what. Yeah, it's sliding. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at this a little closer and figure out what I want to do. So, turns out that is super rounded down there. So, broke it loose with some locking pliers. And you want to swing it low so that the locking pliers don't get interfered with by the reservoir. So now that it's broken loose, I'll try to use the flare wrench. If it's too beat up, I'll just keep using the locking pliers. get this guy out. All right, you have two. Let's get this positioned. Sorry about the light, guys. Time change and all that. You've got two 11/16 that hold the pump proper into its bracketry. There's one up there, and then there is one down in the corner, kind of chilling out behind the pulley. I'm not 100% certain if we can get that guy out with the pulley in, but I'm going to try. I've got an 11/16 ratcheting wrench right here. I'm going to slip that in there and try to get her done. Okay, so what I wound up doing here is I took that one out in the corner I talked about. The one up here came out first. I had just enough room. Getting that out of the way let me flex the pump a little bit so I could get the one in the corner out of the way. And then I had to come over and take out the one I had loosened for pivoting. And then the actual slider bolt had to come out too. So ultimately what comes out is this entire bracket, which I'm probably going to have to fight with the wiggle out, and then the pump. Now in my case, I moved the clamp on the low pressure line in the back. I slid it down so it's no longer clamping the hose to the pump, but I couldn't get an angle on it, so my thought is I'm going to just yoink the pump up and that will get that line off. Okay, got the pump out, and as you can see, if you look, camera, I don't know if it'll pick it up, but there is a ton of glitter in that fluid coming out of the reservoir of the pump. So this pump was done, is done. Oh my goodness. I think this is an actual Motorcraft pump. Wow.
But you want to bet they swapped the pump without clearing it out and completely fragged the new pump.
So we're going to cover taking this pulley off next. I'm going to try to use a 3-jaw puller. There's a specific kind of puller for this. I'm going to see if I can't work around that. We shall see. We shall see. Gotta let this drain first before I throw it on the bench. Alright guys, give me a second to get the light kind of where it needs to be. And then try to get the camera to focus. Focus. Alright, check it out. This is the other end, that black hose you see. That's the other end of the low pressure line on the power steering pump. It is ear clamped on. See if I can get better light on it. Nope, okay. It's ear clamped on to a metal line that loops around a bit and then eventually comes back to the steering box. Now it's an ear clamp. I don't remember how to open those, so I'm going to get my little Dremel type tool and I'm going to cut the band. And with that, I should be able to get this hose off, and when I go to put it back on, it's going to be a worm clamp. But this hose is as hard as a rock, and it's done. So it needs to be replaced, so I'm taking it off. Alright guys, I am back. You may notice a hole down there. That is the other end of the high pressure side of the power steering pump. That was turned out I wound up having to use my metric tools. That was a 16mm. I think it's an 11/16 if you're not going to be a heathen like me and stay with SAE. I did that because after I got it broken loose with my long 16, I have this little miracle of modernity. I have a stubby 16mm, which was just perfect for getting in there and working on that, and got her out. So now we have, after catching on that and dropping something over here, which I will figure out what that is, we have all the things. We've got the pump, we got the low pressure line out, we got the high pressure line out. This low pressure line, as I said, is shot. High pressure line is not looking great, so I probably will replace that as well. And we're going to replace the pump. So next step is pulley. Pump should have mostly drained by now. We'll plug it, and we're going to throw it on the bench and see what we can do to get that pulley off. Good morning, everyone. Today is a new day. So we're going to pick back up where we left off on the power steering pump. We need to remove the pulley from the pump, and there is a specialized puller that I have acquired that uses this nose, this snout on the pulley. It'll grab onto that so we can pull it off. And unlike most of the videos I watch to figure out this process, I'm actually going to show you how you put this on so that you can put it on successfully and then get this pulley off. Okay, first let's talk about the puller real fast. I'll just show you what it looks like. This is the kit. It is a multi-function puller, so it'll work for Fords, GMs. I don't know if Dodge ever used this system, but you're gonna have to get the right particular piece for whatever pulley you're pulling. And I have not put this on yet, but this is the kit. I rented this from the local part house because in all the years of wrenching I've done, this is the first time I've had to pull a pulley. So this case, cheaper to rent than to buy. So I'm gonna figure out which one of these goes where, and then I'll go ahead and we'll go through this together. All right, let's talk about the pieces of our kit here. There's a puller and a pusher on this. You want to make sure that you don't get the two pieces mixed up. There should be instructions with it, but you know, it's always nice to see. So here's this collar. It's going to go around the snout of the pulley. You've got kind of a flat side and a beveled side. The beveled side needs to go on the bottom, right around here, like that. But this, which is the puller, needs to go inside that collar, like this. Okay? But now, in order to keep stuff from running away, you need to put this collar over it, like so. And now we're ready to go. So because of this two-piece collar system, it's now hooked around the nose of the pulley. And we got to turn this and this at the same time. According to the instructions, this is going to be a 5/8. This is going to be a 13/16. Turn them both, and this should lift the pulley off of the power steering assembly. So small correction there, had the collar upside down. So you do need to flip it. You need the collar side that is taller to go and hook on the snout of the pulley. And the shorter side gets covered by the fact that the puller has a pretty broad shoulder on itself. So correction there. Like I say, I make mistakes. All right, let's see if we can't get this figured out. So big guy is going to go there. And
you just need to hold it still. You're going to need a bigger lever.
Well, let's see what we can do. Go ahead. Yep, going to need a bigger lever. Now I got to go find my proper size 16ths or a 16 socket on a breaker bar. That also would work. So a little something like that is how this puller is supposed to work. You can do this in vehicle. I have seen that done in video. I prefer having lots of space to work. So that's why I went ahead and pulled the pump out to do it outside. And just like that, that's how it comes off. And now you can change out your pump. Now you may be wondering, well, why didn't you use a 2-jaw or a 3-jaw puller, which in theory could work, but take a look there. The reason why is that basically this pulley is not strong enough to use that style of puller, and when you hook the jaw around the edge of the pulley, it will deform it. So you have to use this very specific power steering pump puller. If you try to shortcut it, you're going to damage your pulley. In my case, I did damage it, but not enough to be critical. I was able to straighten it back out. But now that this is done, I will clean this up. The old pump is going to go back to the store as a core. I still need to get that money back, return that to them, and we can go ahead and put this on the new pump. Okay, so our replacement pump is a Master Pro 711-2115. One thing to keep in mind is if you look at the fine print on this, this is for 1989 F-Series vehicles that were manufactured before March of 1989. So you're going to need to check your door sticker and see when your vehicle was manufactured. Mine was made in January, so this will work. If you're after March, you're going to have to do some more searching to find the other style pump that goes in. It's going to be harder to find, but just good to know things. I already inspected this. It looks about the same. We're going to go ahead, like I said, clean up the pump, transfer it. I'll show you how to use the pusher element, and we'll just keep moving forward. Okay, so when you go to put a pulley back on, to press it on, you do not need the collar. You do not need this thrust washer or bobber. What you do need is this guy, which is the pusher tool. It threads into the pulley itself, so you thread it all the way down, and then the way you're actually going to push is you're going to use this jam nut. So you get an appropriate size tool for the jam nut. That's what's going to do that. You need another tool up here to keep this from spinning as well, because if it spins the whole pulley. So lock that, spin this, push it down until it seats. So my brother's turning the jam nut. I'm just keeping the pulley itself from spinning. He's also got a hand on the pump. Keep it from bebopping around. And you just kind of do this until, I believe it should start feeling really tight once it gets seated.
Yeah, it'll bottom out.
And that's when you know that you're good to go.
It'll be, you know, this is moving relatively easily, and it'll all of a sudden just turn into a brick wall. And that means you're bottoming out. Don't go any further.
Yep. And there you go. That is one pulley now pressed onto a new pump. Now that this is done, this is good, but we need to turn our attentions back to the truck, because as it is clearly stated on about 15 different warning stickers, I need to flush out the steering lines as best I can, since that pump, I think, ate itself. Otherwise, we void warranty if that pump dies. So I'm going to work on that. So I have this flushing agent left over from when I did a transmission in my Ford Fusion. And I figure that uses ATF, and this steering pump uses ATF. So should be able to try to squirt this in there and make some stuff happen. So I've got them covered here, but if you remember from earlier in the video, we have two lines. There's a low pressure line that we have open, and then there's a high pressure line. I'm going to try squirting in from the high pressure side and see what happens. If I can't get anything to happen, I'll try squirting in from the low pressure side, and then we'll see what happens. So kind of hard to see here. That's what the cooler clean's letting me do as I'm flushing out the whole system here. See how now it's mostly white coming out, no red, so I think I've got most of it flushed. And then what you're supposed to do is come in with some air and then flush all your cooler clean out, and then I'll cap both ends again, and we'll have to bleed all the air out of the system whenever the new pump gets installed. We'll put the front up in the air, and you turn the wheels lock to lock and all that good stuff. All right, next up, we need to make sure we have the right power steering line. I believe we do. Just so you know, when you go to do this, there are, for an 89 F-350 at least, there are 3 lines available. There is this one, which is called the conventional line, which is if you have vacuum assisted brakes, which is what I have. And then there are 2 other lines that are for if you have a hydro boost system. So keep that in mind. This is a Precision 134-01437. So we're going to take this out. We're going to examine the bins and make sure they look correct. I believe they are. But we have an O-ring that we need to place here. And I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, so our old line here is going to be curlier because it was used, but I know which end is what because this end here with the rounded out nut is the one that went into the power steering pump. So we know that that sat kind of like this, and we know the other end needs to be bent like that, and we do see that, and the rest of this bend is just the rubber, right, getting contorted into a certain position over time. So it looks like we got the right hose, but you'll also see, and I couldn't see this the other night when I pulled this, but this O-ring is in really bad shape. So that's probably one of the reasons why the system got so low to where it started eating itself, is that this O-ring was probably leaking, because she's rough, as you can see. So it looks like we got the right line. We're going to put an O-ring on there. We'll throw a little grease, a little oil on that so the O-ring will float and not stick. And then we're going to start reinstalling stuff. Alright, strategy time. So when I pulled this out, I had left this is the end going into the steering gear, steering box. That was still connected. This was not, so I'm going to put it back in the same order. So I'm going to go ahead and get this connected into the steering box. Make sure that's done and tight and good. And then I'll connect this after I get the pump reinstalled. Meanwhile, don't forget about your low pressure line. This is actual power steering hose. You can get it at your local part house by the foot. This is in 3/8. As I mentioned earlier, this end, I'll reuse this spring clamp for the power steering pump end. But the other end was an ear clamp. I'm going to replace that with a worm clamp. And same deal. The lower side that had the ear clamp was already installed, so I'm going to put that back in first. And then I will connect this end once the pump is installed. So, alright, that was not fun, but it is now in. So, main thing I want to show you here is that's how it needs to bend. You need to run the line under the battery ground. That's the big black wire above that. And what I had to do to get the angle right, to get the tube nut to bite, is I actually had to squeeze and bend the metal hard line ever so slightly together so I could get the appropriate angle to thread this in. So if you've never worked with a tube nut, most commonly you mess with them up here on your brakes. They have to be lined up perfectly for them to start threading appropriately. You can't kind of sneak your way in there like you can with a bolt. It has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, it'll just bounce right out. And it's really frustrating. In my case, I wound up having to use a 14mm to get that in. It's in now. That was really poopy, and I hope I don't have to do that again for a long time. While you're down here, take a look at your rag joint, which is that greasy mess right there. It's normally under this plastic collar. This drag joint looks okay. Someone may have serviced it at some point recently. It actually looks pretty good. It doesn't appear that there's an upper rag joint, but when those things fail, your steering gets super sloppy, and if it doesn't have some kind of a backup system, it fails completely. So keep an eye on those guys. Like I said, this one looks fine, and they're pretty easy to replace. You just need to be aware of them. Alright, probably you can see it right down there. I got a clamp in. Hopefully that won't leak. I'll have to double check it. It will accept a 3/8 line, but you gotta work at it. It's not in a fun place. Next step is, I now know you don't have to take this bracket out, so the long bolt that feeds in right here, I'm gonna get that fed back in and make sure it's good. I'll leave it loose so I can rotate stuff, but I don't want this bracket slipping out of place, because then I think I'd have to get a hammer out and beat it back in position, and I really don't want to do that. So let me go do that, and then we're going to work on getting the power steering back together, the actual pump back in. Alright, apologize for the glare, still working on using a new light source, and it's kind of OP. There, that's better. Okay, so what I figured out, this pump has 3 mounting bolts. I have 2 bolts with me. So some point in the past, somebody got in here and messed with this pump, or the old one, and they either couldn't get it back, one of them back on, or something. Anyway, so I'm going to roll with 2, but bear in mind you should have 3 plus the slider adjustment bolt. And the slider adjustment bolt, you know it is it because it's shorter than the mounting bolts. So I've got 1 mounting bolt in at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and get the other one up over here. See if I can't sneak that in behind the pulley. What we kind of realized, Dud, is that this was all meant, you can use that puller to service it in the vehicle, which I mentioned earlier, but you're kind of supposed to do that so that it's much easier to get your mounting bolts in and out, because otherwise the pulley interferes with that quite a bit, and you have to get kind of tricky to feed your bolt in and get it to line up. But I'm going to go ahead and get my second one started over here. I'm going to get this somewhat snugged up, and then I will attach the lines. I'll try to film attaching the lines, but I mean, putting in a mounting bolt's pretty straightforward.
1/16 wrench.
Okay, so what's going on here is I found out that you really are supposed to take this thing off in the vehicle. So what I did, so I could get the access I needed to get bolts in, is backed it off a little bit, but not all the way off. That gave me the room to slide in bolts. I dug into my stash. I found another bolt that was compatible, so I've got 3 again, which makes me feel better. And now, as you can see, we got the pusher back on, and we're just going to reseat the pulley all the way in as it should be. To keep this one wobbling up and down, I went ahead and for the moment, I locked in the adjuster bolt so this thing won't flop anymore. And we're going to take care of that, and then I will move back to getting the rest of these lines on. All right, let me move the angelic light here. There we go. So that turned out to be an 11/16, and you are going to have to flex the soft line a bit. That's okay, as long as it doesn't kink. That's the key. And then if we come back over here, as you can see, I've connected the power steering line. I slid the clamp into position. When it's not, 30 years old and ossified, it's not hard to do. So the last thing we need to do here is feed the belt back on. So you can see we're still loose, right? So we're going to get the belt on, and then this gets tightened back up all the way, and then the slider adjuster gets tightened back up all the way, and then we will proceed with filling and burping the system, because right now it's got a massive amount of air in it. Okay, this is the plan for tensioning. Now keep in mind this is almost all the way tight, but not fully, because if it's fully tight, this bracket cannot pivot. So we got a breaker bar. I'm gonna shove the head right there, and when I give the go signal, my brother is gonna crank on this, which will lift this up, which will tension this belt. And while he's holding that, I will go to this slider bolt here, and I will make it tight with a 9/16 that I happen to have over here. And once that's tight, I'll come back up and I'll finish tightening this, and then we'll check the belt deflection. If you're wondering what is belt deflection, that's when you get to about the middle of travel on a bolt and on a belt, and you push on it and you see how much the belt gives. You see how we have a lot of deflection? You just tightened it up. See how we have less? There's a certain amount of deflection that you want to have when you get all this stuff set up. If the belt's too tight, it can pull and actually damage itself. If it's too loose, it'll slide and it'll jump. So you need to find the Goldilocks zone. I don't have that number on me. I don't have...
I think it's about 1/2 inch.
Okay, so depending on the belt travel or how long the segment is, it varies. We're going to aim for 1/2 inch, but you can kind of feel it also in your finger when you push. It'll feel right. And I know that's a terrible explanation, but once you do this, you'll kind of know. You'll know if it feels too tight, and you'll know when it's like this and it's just way too loose. So we're going to go ahead and do the thing. Okay, so this is Dexmerk. Not to be confused with Mercon. It's technically the same, but not. It's the same stuff, but licensing, branding things. So this is supposed to be an ATF Type F pump from Ford. That's the Type F part. You can use that. I did some reading online. Dexmerc also works just fine, or Mercon. And the other thing that'll also work is Mercon 5 apparently will also work okay. I would not put in LV. That's not very smart. This does not use specific power steering fluid. Again, you want to use Mercon 3 or Mercon 5 or Dexmerc. This is just Dexmerc. It'll work just fine. As you can see, the level slowly dropping as air is getting out of the system. We want to let this do this for a bit so we can take care of the really huge air bubbles. Then the next step is the front end is going to get lifted up, and we're going to turn the wheels lock to lock until the pump quiets down, because when the pump has air in it, it's very noisy and grumbly and whiny.
Did it burp?
More so than usual. Alright, my brother's gonna bump it to kind of give you an idea. The bumping, what it should do is it's gonna turn the pulley here, and that should draw fluid down into the system. Go ahead and hit it. A little more. You can bump it a little longer. I'm not really pulling anything down. We may have to actually start it. That's the glow relay. Do not be alarmed.
You want me to start it?
Yeah, let me get out of the way. Come here, Gimli.
You ready?
Yeah, go ahead and bump it. There, now I can talk again. So we're still going to need to lift it in the air to get all of it out, but it's a good sign that the pump wasn't whining like a demon or anything like that. So go ahead. So my brother is turning the wheel. Obviously the engine's off and the front wheels are in the air. And so he is turning it, and what we should be seeing is hopefully we see air getting forced out. See that? Should be an air bubble coming out here in a second. So we're trying to go ahead and kind of prime the whole system as much as we can before we turn. There we go. Turn it on, because I don't want to have the pump destroy itself. So we're just going to do this, pump off a little bit, and then we'll turn it on and try this. Alrighty, so see how low that level is? That is the result of turning the wheel when it was off, and then we just turned it on. We didn't move the wheel, we just turned it on. And I guess we got enough air out that it actually could draw in fluid, and it instantly brought it down to the actual reservoir out of the tube. So we're going to fill it, we're going to repeat it and fill it and repeat it until it is not insta-draining every time we turn the engine on. Alright, so that's how we look. Don't know if the camera can pick it up. There's still some metal fragments in there. The best I can do right now. The air's all out of it, so we'll see how it feels once the wheels are back on the ground. Okay, we put it back on the ground. As you can see, turn the wheel back and forth. In fact, let me show you this, and I should be able to actually talk from over here because it's not in front of the engine. Alright, so take a look at the wheel. You can see it's turning, right? Now here's the other part of that. I'm doing that with just one hand, and I'm not really having to fight with it. And this is my weaker arm. I had a accident when I was a kid, so my right arm's way weaker than my left, and I can turn this easily. So what I'm driving at here is this is a good repair. I did what I set out to do, which is take care of the really heavy feeling in the steering wheel, and that was caused by a dying pump that had basically eaten itself. I don't know why it did that. I think the main driver was it was leaking and somebody just let it leak, and so it was getting really low on fluid, and then it just started eating itself once it started cavitating, and that was that. I'll keep an eye on these various fittings, make sure that none of them leak, but I didn't see any leaks, so good repair. Alrighty folks, that's going to do it for this video where we removed and replaced a bad power steering pump on a 1989 Ford F-350 7.3 IDI diesel. If you found this video interesting, if you found it entertaining, if you found it of value, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. That does help generate revenue so I can make extra content for the channel, bringing more stuff like this. Please also leave a comment. I like to read them, I like to reply to them, and I like to learn from them. And lastly guys, as you saw in this video, I do make mistakes, and I leave them in the videos so that you guys can learn from my mistakes and we all wind up a little bit better. So I'll catch you guys next episode.